everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining. I'm Coles and I'll be your host for the day. Before we start, a little bit about us. Bhavan Cybertech is a global provider of digital transformation solutions in the areas of predictive analytics, digital supply chain management, and digital experience management. A firm believer in connected innovation, Bhavan Cybertech has entered into a strategic partnership with MemSQL. MemSQL is a cloud-native operational database built for speed and scale and redefines the limits of what's possible. Just to set some context, we all know that the telecom industry is growing at an exponentially fast pace. With 5G, Wi-Fi 6, AI, IoT, and a lot of emerging technologies, data volumes are growing, complexities are rising. The question is, how to create compelling customer experiences in this ecosystem of connected everything. In today's webinar, we'll discuss on building telcos of the future in this ever-growing and ever-changing ecosystem. We have with us Dominic from MemSQL and Osama from Bhavan Cybertech to take us through the discussion. Dominic Ravita is Field CTO and Vice President of Product Marketing, MemSQL. Dominic has over 20 years of experience across application development, architecture, and data platforms. As Field CTO at MemSQL, he advises enterprises on the appropriate use of various technologies and architectures within strategic initiatives using the database's capabilities. Welcome, Dominic. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Osama Moshin is Integration Pre-Sales Manager, Bhavan Cybertech. Osama has over 20 years of experience in digital technology and transformation experience across numerous industries, including media and telecommunications. He is an integration expert in hybrid integration cloud architecture, microservices, and application modernization. He handles large technology transformation projects across the Middle East and North Africa. Welcome, Osama. Delighted to have you here.
Thank you. Same thing.
So before I hand over to Osama, a little bit of housekeeping. This webinar will be for an hour. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up during the presentation. We also have a question and answer session at the end. Request all of you to keep your microphones muted when you're not speaking. If you have any queries, raise your hand. One of us will attend to you. Thank you. Over to Osama now.
Thank you, Coles. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to be on those webinars where we talk to our customers about the latest and greatest things that we do and deliver for our customers. So in today's webinar, basically, we will be talking about how to build the telecom of the future with the IoT and streaming analytics. From the agenda perspective, I will go through very few slides in the beginning. We will talk to you about BCT and what are the main services that we are providing for our customers. Then I will hand over to Dominic, who will dive deep on MemSQL and talk to us about what MemSQL is all about and some of the use cases where MemSQL has been successfully implemented. At the end, I'll touch base on one of those use cases where as a BCT has helped one of the telecom customers that we have in this region implement MemSQL and touch base on the added value that we managed to achieve as part of that. So Bhavan Cybertech basically is an international company that has been established in 1999. Our headquarters is in Muscat in Oman. We work with Fortune 500 companies around the globe. We have more than 1,000 enterprise customers where we help them run their most critical solutions in their production environment. We have more than 3,000 employees distributed across more than 20 countries around the world. We enjoy the highest level of partnership with the world-leading technologies companies around the world, including MemSQL, Microsoft of the world, IBM, Oracle, and many others. We work in different industries, as you can see in the middle of the slide. And when it comes to telecom, we always provide different services for our telecom customers where we help them in their BSS and OSS stacks. where we help them also get and implement the right technologies in order to accelerate their digital transformation journey and having the right solutions to the different use cases that they may have. We also work with other industries like airlines, oil and gas, government, retails, and many other industries. Our solutions and services basically help organizations redefine their business models, stabilize their stakeholder environment, improve customer interaction and the relationships. And MemSQL can play a big role in this space, as we will see in the coming few slides. We also help our customers improving their business processes to work more profitably and stay ahead and agile. And what, next slide, if you can go, calls, please. Yeah, and basically, Bahwan Sapartech is a global digital transformation company. We help our trusted partner in the area of streaming analytics, digital experience, application integration, cloud migration, and many more. And as highlighted, we operate in more than 20 countries across the globe, as you can see in this slide, where we try to highlight some of the customers and the technologies that we use in order to drive innovation through our proven digital transformation services and our powerful IP solutions. And when it comes to BCT digital services that we will see maybe in the next slide, in this, yes, calls, if you can go to the next slide, sorry for that. Yeah. So, and when it comes to BCT digital services that we will, where we provide our services to the customers that we are having here, we always like to start with the digital transformation consultation, which is one of the main topics on most of the CIO's agendas nowadays, where we offer services in the areas of IT strategy, enterprise architecture, and IoT portfolio management for organizations and business leaders in order to help them get an accurate and real-time data insights so they can make more informed decisions and also reduce risk and drive improvement across their business. The other area that we also provide is MemSQL services. And this is basically coming from the latest partnership that we have established with MemSQL, where we combine technology, services, and industry best practices to serve the growing demand for data warehouse, databases, real-time streaming analytics, IoT, data ingestion. And in the coming slide, we will talk in more details about some of those use cases that we have successfully implemented with the help of MemSQL guys. The other area that we also specialize in as a PCT is big data and analytics. And as you may all know, big data is changing the way organizations get and use information. Insight from big data enables organizations to make better decisions, strengthen customer engagement, optimize operations, and capitalize on new sources of revenue. Our expertise and experience in big data span different technologies, including Hadoop, Oracle Big Data, MemSQL, and many other technologies. We also offer analytics services to our customers so they can extract real value from their data and to help them make the right decision at the right time. We also provide cloud services where we help our customers become digital by using cloud as part of their foundation to derive new insights, having scalability opportunities, and build new models for creating richer, more meaningful customers experience. We offer different solutions in the area of cloud, including cloud assessment, cloud migration services, cloud path services, cloud management and support services, and many others. We also provide user interfaces services, where we offer user interface consultation and development services in the areas of web applications, mobile applications, e-commerce portals, enterprise scale software applications, and anything that has to do with the user interface. And the last thing that we also offer in this area is there may be the mobility services, because as you all know, mobile services becomes a core services at any organization. And in this area, we have our mobile application development team who provide seamless and unified experience to users across different mobile operating systems, including Android, Windows, and iOS devices. And in the next slide, we can see a snapshot of some of the BCT customers that we have worldwide. So here we can see some of the trusted customers that we have worldwide, where we help them build their applications that they have in their production environment. And as you can see, we have some customers in telecoms, we have some customers in government sector, we have some customers in retail, airlines, oil and gas. So we are available across all those different industries that we are talking about. I don't want to take a lot of time from you. That's only just to give you a quick overview about BCT and the different services that we are providing for our customers. In the coming few slides, Dominic will go through those slides with you, and he will highlight you how MemSQL can help you with the digital transformation journey that you are doing right now. So it's for you, Dominic.
Thank you, Osama. And thanks to all of our guests for joining. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the trends that we're seeing in media and telecommunications, and also a little bit about MemSQL as a company, and I'll cover 3 customer use cases and close up with how you can get started. So a lot's been said about the value of data, and you can see the stats here on the value that you can get from data when leveraged in a competitive manner. And it all is how you lens this. Operate more efficiently, take advantage of opportunities in the market. And so with that, MemSQL provides this ability to take better advantage of data in the moment. Next slide. So there's a lot happening in media and telecommunications right now, and I think there's a lot of crossover between media and telecom. But just looking at the pure telecommunications trends that we see in our customers around the world, there are 5 trends that really stand out in the adoption of new technologies within telcos. 5G is first and foremost among all of these. Once broadband came available, when the next generation or 3rd generation of these devices came around with Apple and the iPhone in 2007, you had all the ingredients to have what we have today, which is a hyper-connected computer in your pocket. So 5G is going to be a huge step change as that gains adoption around the world very quickly, and new applications that weren't possible, for instance, with AR and VR, are going to enhance the customer experience. They're going to create new sorts of applications to take advantage of. So this is a big increase in the amount of data that's going to be generated. Secondly, Wi-Fi 6 is, a super fast Wi-Fi. And with 5G and together with Wi-Fi 6, you're going to be able to see this
Dominic, we seem to have lost you. Let's hold on for a bit. Dominic is reconnecting. Sorry for the inconvenience. There's a technical problem challenge with Dominic. He is reconnecting in a couple of minutes. Thanks for waiting. Dominic has joined, so we'll be starting. Yes, Dominic, welcome back.
Okay, you should be able to hear me.
Yes, we lost you for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Sorry about that, everyone. All right, so I'll continue. So yeah, as I was saying, artificial intelligence is being embedded to all sorts of processes. And the key thing here is that AI algorithms and machine learning models are data hungry. You want to be able to feed them as much data as possible and as diverse a set of data as possible for the pattern recognition to occur during training, but then at production so that they perform well and that you get the optimal answers and responses. So again, how data is leveraged at speed and volume matters for a good outcome with artificial intelligence. Internet of Things is yet another factor and dimension that's driving not just connectivity, but what's possible with the interaction across for applications. It is driving the adoption of new data. It's used significantly out in the field for nodes on a wireless network to determine the health of field equipment in telecom, but in lots of industries. And so that's yet another deluge of data that's coming that you want to take advantage of to have your finger on the pulse of business operations. And then finally, cybersecurity. All of these interconnected devices through IoT and super fast connections increase the surface area of the security profile such that you want to be able to have secure connections to protect against new cyber threats, which will emerge with the adoption of these technologies. So next slide. So in general, what we're seeing is that the demands are growing, and I've cited a few specific telco examples of the technology adoption that's driving this in the media and telco space. And so we see this data volume rising, and the complexity has been rising as it has for years. We're now about to experience this step change increase in those with 5G. And simultaneously, because we've had these devices in our pockets for so long, everyone expects immediate answers to everything. They expect the consumer experience inside of the business experience. And increasingly, we're expected to be able to run analytics on current data and also live data. Contrast that to the right side of the picture here, and we see the challenges in living up to these expectations and dealing with these trends, which is it takes time to change these systems. Often the current architectures and the data tiers aren't able to meet the SLAs to provide the kind of insights needed in the moment or in the operational windows that are most effective. The way we're building systems in the old way and translating that into the cloud, it's very simple to spin up new infrastructure and databases. It's very quick, but now we're paying on a per usage basis. And over time, that's much more expensive than the former way of acquiring technology and building. And also, it's increasing complexity. So we're seeing a cloud complexity arise that's a new kind of complexity we didn't see on-prem. And then finally, concurrency. We're looking at increasing concurrency demands as an application becomes popular and it scales globally. You need to be able to do that quickly, whether it's in on-prem or in the cloud, and existing systems with traditional databases tend to struggle at doing that. Next slide. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about who MemSQL is and our mission. So MemSQL, we call ourselves the database of now. And what that means is that our strong suit is addressing scenarios in the moment. So when a moment matters in terms of seizing an opportunity, such as customer experience point in time, or it's about saving a life in the case of a few customers like Thorn and Madaxian from MemSQL. Thorn protects children from child trafficking by identifying them online and using image recognition at scale across the web. So that's the combination of a data-hungry AI model that's trained on image recognition and then allows law enforcement to identify a potential child that's being trafficked. So in these cases, all the moments matter and how fast it takes. So the first prime use case that MemSQL serves is what we call operational analytics, which is you've got to deliver high concurrency transactions and analytics on those. And the response time of the analysis or the query response time is very important. We like to call this that it's analytics with an SLA, a service level agreement. And so another way to say this is low latency, consistent query response times. So when you're doing kind of a customer experience, like a point of sale interaction, and you want the result to be dynamically determined, this can't be seconds or minutes behind. It's got to happen within a few seconds or under a second. And you simply can't see that from traditional, well, even modern cloud databases like Snowflake and Google BigQuery. They simply can't provide this because their product architectures inhibit that. So MemSQL is great to augment those kinds of cloud databases, but as well as do this on-prem and replace things like Vertica and Netezza and Oracle Exadata. And I'll cover this a little bit more later. Secondly, a key use of MemSQL is modernizing and moving to the cloud that allows you to free yourself from existing single node databases and go with the cloud native, distributed native database that allows you to scale. So those trends I mentioned earlier in telcos that are increasing the data, the size, the volume, the velocity, the variety, MemSQL helps you to start small in the beginning, and it's a scale out distributed database, so you can take advantage of that as you grow. And then finally, incorporating machine learning, AI, and predictive analytics. And the Thorn example I gave is an example where you can when you operationalize an ML model, you're doing it with MemSQL at scale at production volume. So the data access for that model when it's being scored, when transactions are being scored, not the limiting factor. So who do we do this for? We do this for half the top 10 banks in North America, 2 of the 3 top telcos. We work a lot with streaming media companies, a growing set in the Fortune 50, and technology leaders and technology and software as a service providers often use MemSQL to enhance the customer experience. Next slide.
While you talk about cloud, Dominic, there's a question. So you were discussing about cloud complexity. Can you elucidate on that?
Sure. Can we take questions at the end, perhaps?
Sure. Yeah, we'll park this.
Okay. I'd be happy to answer that in the Q&A. So a little bit more about MemSQL's technology, and there's really 3 things to remember about MemSQL. First, it's a scalable relational SQL database, and so it's distributed native. How that's different than Oracle or open source databases like MySQL or Postgres, et cetera, is that you don't have to provide any sort of additional software to scale it out, like sharded middleware or anything like that. The Amazon databases typically that they're hosting are single node databases like MySQL, which they then replicate and distribute data across. That matters because it's less efficient. It's more problematic to patch if you're managing it yourself. And efficiency matters in the cloud because you're paying by the byte and you're paying by the compute cycle. So at really large volumes, this really starts to be very expensive. So MemSQL is more efficient because it's been built from the ground up over the last 10 years to provide a scalable, scale out relational SQL database that's ANSI compliant and supports ACID transactions. The second major point is that it's converged data. It supports converged data, meaning that what you're thinking of traditional relational database data types, of course, we support all of those and the built-in functions you'd expect. But we've incorporated the ability to support other data models, such as document, time series, geospatial, key value. So you can perform traditional document-oriented use cases like you would with Mongo or Couchbase directly in MemSQL. So you can treat MemSQL as a document store. The difference is that when you write and fetch your documents and query into the raw JSON data type, with MemSQL, you can also provide an analytics structure for that data, which you won't find in other document databases like Mongo, for instance. And so the advantage is that you get blazingly fast analytical queries, and you can join across data because we have a column store built in, which is the ideal storage format for analytics, as well as have the convenience of reading and writing in a document-oriented fashion. So that's one aspect of converged data. The second aspect is that we support both row storage and column storage in a single database. Most analytic databases support just column, most column store. Most OLTP databases support just in-memory row store. With MemSQL, we support both in the same database. And we've gone a step further, which is to provide this capability, which we call single store, which allows you to basically not have to choose the table type at design time, but increasingly you can just create any table, and we'll perform we'll store it in the optimal fashion for the workload. That's really an important thing. It makes design with MemSQL much simpler than other options. And increasingly, you'll see this as just a single default table type. So I'll cover this a little bit more a little bit later. Thirdly, we're optimized for real time. And there's multiple levels of the technology and the product that allows us to be optimized. But suffice it to say at this point that from the chipset with x86, which we run on commodity hardware, all the way up to different levels of storage, from non-volatile memory, persistent memory, SSDs, etc. We are optimizing each of those along the way. So next slide. So back to media and telecommunications. Here are a listing of a few of the common use cases that we are doing with customers today. And it's not an exhaustive list, but I think it's a good representative list of where we've seen this. With media, especially with OTT, telcos around the world are getting beyond just their traditional providing connectivity. And in some cases, they're getting into the application and services on top of their networks, or they're partnering with a media company to provide that sort of thing. So we're starting to see in some markets, some of this blend together. And there's some similarity between these use cases with ad analytics and ad optimization, which is, and ad serving, such as real-time interactions where you're inserting an ad based on the time slot, the audience. You want to insert it for the right price if you're the advertiser. So a customer like of MemSQL's like Pandora, for instance, which is a streaming music service, they have an AI algorithm that determines what song's being played next, and using lots of different dimensions, both historical and real time in terms of your behavior, in terms of liking the song or not, et cetera, it'll select an ad. And so part of their value proposition to advertisers is more personalization of the ad, so it has a greater probability of being viewed and interacted with, click through, et cetera. I'll give you one telco example here. With telco network monitoring, we're helping a major US telco provider in the shift to 5G. And so I mentioned there's a huge increase of roughly 20 times the amount of data. Well, when you're trying to monitor the network for quality to ensure customer experience, you're dealing with a lot more diagnostic data from all of the field towers and devices. And so expanding that with Oracle Exadata would have been prohibitively expensive to meet the performance needs they have, because MemSQL runs on commodity x86 hardware on Linux, and you can run it anywhere. They could get anywhere from 10 to 100 times faster query responses in terms of performance, and anywhere from a third to a tenth the cost, depending on the query, to run that in MemSQL versus Exadata. So it really became a no-brainer on the price performance decision here. And so the new growth of data-hungry apps like that are being used with MemSQL. Next slide. So I'd like to dig into one specific, I'll cover 3 use cases here, but one specific scenario inside of a telecommunications firm. And this is a company formerly called vCare, now called Telgu, Telgu 5, and they operate in India. You might be familiar with them. And they provide billing services for various telcos, and they work with prepaid cell phone plans. And so basically, this is a real-time scenario where they have to select for their telco customer, when a connection is made, that's using a cell phone plan, they have to correctly charge the right cell phone or prepaid plan. And there's a very small time window or time budget they're allowed to make this determination. And you see that they're listed 250 milliseconds to 35 milliseconds is the what they were able to reduce it to. And if they miss that time window, then they've missed the opportunity to charge or debit that prepaid plan, which means basically the caller gets a free call. And then telco has not, fulfilled their obligation to their telco customer. So it's very critical, obviously, that they be able to operate in this time window. So next slide. So a few of the challenges here in doing this, you're having to do real-time metering and rating and billing in the context of a shift from 4G to 5G gets increasingly difficult. If you fail to meet the billing window SLA, like I said, you get basically a free call. That's great for the caller, but not so great for Telco or their customers. And you can't really you can't slow down this connection. Otherwise, you have a bad customer experience. So with MemSQL, you saw the stat. We helped them reduce latency by 91%, help increase the completed calls, and are helping them grow to serve additional customers at higher volume. Next slide. So there's a global company, Akamai, you may have heard of. They're a content delivery network. And although not a telco themselves, I thought this was an interesting study to share because it has a lot of similarities with communication service providers, media companies, and telecommunications firms. And some telcos provide content delivery network capabilities. And for them, with a globally deployed CDN, getting daily billing work done that was accurate was the challenge. As you can imagine, they have servers all over the world that are serving content, and they have a sophisticated set of plans for their customers based on usage. And in that way, it's similar to a telecommunications cell phone plan with the diversity of plans and the different sorts of ratings. So the challenge here was to be able to, as they collect that data and consolidate it for billing purposes, it's consolidated from all over the world, from thousands of points of presence. And so the challenge was basically a write challenge on writing the data to the database. And in this case, we helped them achieve 6 million upserts per second, which has an impact on their revenue reporting. So next slide. The previous solution, this is another example of in a telecommunication or service provider example where we replaced Oracle Exadata. And it's the benefit here is if we've helped them to enable weekly and soon daily billing cycles and increased revenue by tens of millions of dollars because of that faster cadence of reporting. And again, price performance over Exadata, we're saving costs by at least 5 times. And in some cases, queries are 100 times faster. And again, this is not with commodity specialized hardware or engineered systems. MemSQL runs on commodity x86 systems. So next slide. So in the final example I want to share with you is the example of Platform 28. And they are another provider to the telco industry that helps with omni-channel customer engagement. So essentially, big US telcos like AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint outsource the customer engagement call center operations. And Platform 28 helps to simplify all the different channels over chat, telephone, email, all the touch points for the customer, such that this outsourced service can be seamless for their customers, and this lowers the cost for the telcos. Next slide. The challenge here is another one of SLAs, or having an analytics result with a consistent, reliable response time. And this is where MemSQL excels. And so when you're looking at so many different data sources coming in real time, Platform 28 has this challenge of providing analytics, as a performance of how well their call center operations were being handled for their customers. And so there were, more than 200 different KPIs being tracked at different intervals, from 5 to 60 to 300-second intervals. So that's a lot of data being crunched for analytics on a continuous basis for these different time frames. And so the challenge is that running this in a cloud database such as Amazon AWS Redshift, they were getting delays. So they started there, that wasn't working out. They moved to Snowflake. That met the close to the time frames that they wanted, but it became too expensive to run this amount of data. So when it comes to price and performance, and in this case in a cloud SaaS solution, MemSQL delivers better than what you find with AWS or Snowflake. And what they measured was it was 40% better in performance than Snowflake at 75% less the cost. So with these three examples, I think we've covered various kinds of telecommunications, media, and related communication services. I'd like to next go into a little bit more about the MemSQL technology in the next 5 to 7 minutes. So next slide. So this is a view of all the functional areas of MemSQL, and I touched a little bit on this earlier, and I want to just drill into a few areas a little bit more. So in the center of the diagram, you see MemSQL, and I mentioned before that we, in a single database, provide both a row store and a column store. And although our company name is MemSQL, it might lead you to believe that we're in-memory only, or an in-memory database. And that's only partly true. It's more accurate to say that MemSQL is memory optimized, meaning that both for the row store and the column store, both use in-memory storage. So for the column store, for instance, you see it's labeled as disk-based column store. We also have sort of an invisible in-memory column store that the application user and the database administrator doesn't see when that data is written. And the benefit of that is that it helps us to, when you're doing analytics with an SLA for some of the use cases I just described, you can do immediate analytics on data that's being ingested over many streams of data as it's being ingested, with just no latency and no locking and no blocking on those transactions. So that's, you can look at that as continuous intelligence. We use this a lot for what we call the operational analytics use cases. So on the left side of the diagram, you see various ways to ingest data from streaming data, bulk data loads, change data capture, which is CDC from other databases that you may be using for your applications and OLTP. And the key thing to point out here is that MemSQL provides a real-time stream data ingestion capability called MemSQL pipelines. And that is a way to do parallel ingestion of data from distributed sources. So Kafka and Spark are two great examples, which we find we're often paired with. Those are distributed sources of data that are doing everything from reliable data distribution, acting as a messaging bus in the case of Kafka, or with Spark, often performing sorts of ETL transformations, data engineering, machine learning. And so MemSQL can ingest from those distributed sources in parallel and ensure that we have exactly right, it exactly wants semantics, so you don't have data duplications. Again, the benefit here is that you eliminate needing an integration middleware that you might typically use, such as an Informatica or a TIBCO BusinessWorks in some cases, because you ingest the raw data and then it lands in MemSQL, which immediately you can perform analytics on, and you can also do transformations in the database. Some people call this ELT, for extract, load, and transform. The key point is that MemSQL now is the processor and the data transformation engine, and as well, and you can treat it as a step in your data factory, so to speak, such that you can ingest the raw data directly to MemSQL, eliminate one more component of your architecture being an integration middleware, operate on MemSQL, and then have a filtered, enriched stream of data, which you can select into Kafka topics from MemSQL. That's a way to sort of use it in a real-time sort of data factory design. The second thing I'll point out here is that we run in containers and on-premise and in the cloud. And the only requirement is that it's x86 chipset and Linux, which is pretty universal and pretty available now. We provide a Kubernetes operator if you want to manage your own Kubernetes environments. But if you're wanting for a pure SaaS solution, you can pick various regions around the world where MemSQL is provided in AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. And finally, just I'll reiterate a little bit I mentioned earlier about MemSQL supporting converged data, and that we not only support traditional relational model and SQL data types, we also, as first-class citizen components, support JSON documents, and more generally, I would say we support semi-structured in JSON, structured in traditional relational database data types, and unstructured in that we can support unstructured text and do text analytics on your data, and we can combine these together. So the benefit here is that you can simplify multiple types of specific or specialty databases like Redis, Elasticsearch, because we do provide an inverse index, a relational database, an in-memory data grid, a document database. And we've seen that in large financial institutions where we've reduced as many as 11 technologies down to just 2 with MemSQL and Kafka. Or we've reduced for Fanatics, which is a sports merchandise company, multiple stream processors like Apache Flink and Redis for a cache into just MemSQL and Kafka. Next slide. So just to wrap up this section, what makes MemSQL unique? It's a combination of a set of unique capabilities, which I've described a little bit here already in terms of that we're distributed cloud native. We don't we're not built out of parts from other projects. Again, that makes us more efficient and have a lower cost of ownership. Secondly, streaming, we support streaming, parallel ingestion of data. We support a lock-free sort of semantics such that as you stream in data, you can immediately access it. You will not get any kind of dirty reads, so we ensure we're immediately consistent. We're not like Apache Cassandra, which is eventually consistent. So you get lock-free semantics, yet immediately consistent data that you can trust. And there's a few other things that I won't have time to go into here further, but I encourage you to look at docs.memsql.com or our YouTube channel at youtube.com/memsql to get detailed information on each of these topics. So next slide. So I've touched on a little bit through the examples how MemSQL compares to other popular databases like Mongo and Oracle and AWS. And so this is a high-level summary of the different levels of functionality supported in each of these. And where the bubble is completely filled, that's what we're saying as 100% support for this capability. And starting with just the first line item here on modern, what we're talking about here and how we define a modern database is that it converges these different types of data types, structured, semi-structured, unstructured. So you no longer, our philosophy is that you no longer need specialty databases. You don't need a database per workload because of the complexity that generates in just the management of the infrastructure. It increases latency when you have to copy data from one to the next with ETL and other change data capture. You also need more skill sets on your enterprise to manage each of these instances and to design correctly for them. And we believe that there's a much simpler, better way. And so you can get the speed and scale of those NoSQL approaches of all the different kinds of NoSQL sources like key value, document, et cetera, but with the expressive power of SQL, standard relational SQL. So you can do both styles, NoSQL and SQL, all in a single database. So we're almost out of time, so I won't go into more detail here. Next slide. So to sum up, the big takeaway in terms of what MemSQL can do, I would say it's these 5 things. And you can read about our benchmark here, where we've done this with a couple of relevant benchmarks from TPC and TPC-DS and TPC-H to back this claim. And really, this is a conservative claim because, as I mentioned, in some cases, we can be 50 to 100 times faster than some of these databases. But on average, for most situations, we're at least 10 times faster and at least a third of the cost or 3 times more cost effective than the alternatives. So you can read that link at your leisure. Next slide. You can get involved with MemSQL in the MemSQL community with memsql.com/community-hub. And next slide. To try it yourself, you can use MemSQL free forever, starting on the right here with the free download. So you can use MemSQL in production. It's only limited by capacity. We have many customers that we in the community are using it in production effectively. If you want to have zero infrastructure and run it in the cloud as a service, you can use our Helios product for that. And you can start with $250 in free credits. So with that, I want to thank everybody for your attention, and I'll hand it back for Q&A.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Osama. That was a very detailed overview. So we have like a lot of questions coming in. Okay, first things first. What infrastructure does MemSQL run on, and where can you deploy MemSQL? And I'm clubbing another question to this. How can you get started with MemSQL?
Okay, great. So infrastructure-wise, as I said, it just requires Linux and an x86 chipset. So you can run it in a self-managed way on your laptop, actually. So you could go to this link, download. We provide it as a Docker image, and literally you can get started in less than 5 minutes running this on your laptop. You can run it in the cloud in the same way and go on to production. Just x86 and Linux are the only requirements. And the second part of that question was, where can you run it? Any of the cloud environments, on-prem, and hybrid environments as well.
Thank you. So we have another question. What is the competitive advantage of this, which is MemSQL versus a Hadoop ecosystem with Parquet files for analytical workloads?
Great question. So Hadoop has been used for years as a place to store raw data, and it's become known as a data lake, as everyone knows. And what's the problem? Well, the advantage of Hadoop has been that you can write data really fast. But the problem has been trying to access it later because it doesn't have a form that suits fast processing or especially analytic processing. So as almost a band-aid to that, you've now started to see various approaches from various companies and open source projects where they try to optimize the structure of the data in the data lake by providing a compressed columnar format, such as ORC or Parquet files. That by itself doesn't solve the big problem that the data still is all over the place. It's mostly unorganized. It does help a little bit in the size of the data because it's compressed. But still you have now many data files. And when you think about when you interact with a database, you don't have to interact with files. Those are completely abstracted from you in a database. So as an application owner or as an application designer, with these approaches that use Parquet files over or in the data lake, for instance, Delta Lake is an example of that. The advantage is you have now a better optimized data structure, but you are still dealing with individual files. And a big advantage of databases is that you're totally abstracted. You have a declarative language called SQL that hides all of the physical storage from you. So I would say the advantage for MemSQL here is that you can ingest directly from S3, you can ingest directly from Hadoop file system, as well as Spark and Kafka, which I mentioned earlier. And when you ingest that raw data, you can activate it or actualize it immediately. So you can have the best of both worlds, deal with the raw data in the data lake, whether it's stored in a legacy data lake like Hadoop or in a more modern data lake like an S3 cloud-based objects or MinIO on-prem, ingest it in raw form directly to MemSQL, MemSQL pipelines, and immediately act on it in an efficient analytic fashion. Great
Okay.
question.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Next question is for Osama. So what is BCT's experience in telcos, with telcos? I mean, especially with providing real-time analytics for telcos. Osama? I think you are on mute, Osama.
Sorry, I didn't know that I'm in mute.
Yeah, that's
Can you hear
fine.
me right now?
Yes, yes.
So from BCT perspective, we have done a couple of implementations when it comes to MemSQL. One of the implementations that we have done in this region is where we were partnering with the MemSQL guys to help one of the largest telecom provider in this region to implement different use cases around MemSQL. So some of those use cases where we have implemented COVID-19 tracing app where we help the customer streaming location records for each mobile device that they have in the database in a very fast way. And we have done other use cases as well. So we have some experience, as we have highlighted in the beginning of the slides. We started building the team before around 6 months, and now we have a big team who are specialized in this area where they can start working with the customers that we have and all the use cases that they may have around that. And in this slide, as you have highlighted, this is the use case that I was referring to actually, where we help these customers implement those use cases that we are talking about.
Thank you, Osama.
Sure.
Dominic, the next is for you. This is, I'm clubbing again 2 questions together, and one of them is quite tricky actually. Why is MemSQL not in the data warehouse report of Gartner? Question number 2. When we presented, while going through the presentation of MemSQL, this seems like a jack of all trades approach versus going with various specific components for specific loads. Will this work for large telcos, or is it specific to small telcos?
Okay, good question. So on the first, MemSQL was in the data management solutions for analytics quadrant, but Gartner then changed the criteria and they changed the revenue requirements actually a few years ago. And so we're no longer in that quadrant with that change criteria. That was a few years ago, maybe I think about 2 years ago. We've grown significantly in that time. We've grown 70% year over year. We just cleared 40 million a year in ARR. We expect to do about 60 million this year. So it's growing at really a record pace with great net dollar retention, top industry metric in those regards on financials. Another thing that's changed in terms of how analysts, especially Gartner, view the market, and this relates to the second question, is that Gartner no longer sees separate markets for these specialty databases, a market for document databases, a market for key value databases, et cetera, or graph databases. They see one market, and these are sets of capabilities that users and businesses expect from a database or a data store in general. And that's the Gartner operational database market segment. And so that is the quadrant that we fit into. And our philosophy, as I said, is to provide one unified converged database that allows you to embrace the various kinds of data styles, data types, data access patterns of these specialty databases, but not to have to manage another component to get the functionality. So we've embraced that functionality. We support it directly in the product in terms of geospatial, time series, document, key value, et cetera, along with relational. And so to answer the question about small telcos or large telcos, I'd say some of the largest telcos in the world, 2 of the top 3 telcos in the US are using MemSQL for the use cases I described here, in some cases, multiple ones. So I would say, we're beating Oracle Exadata in those use cases. So at the very most demanding scenarios for price and performance, we're beating Oracle Exadata there. For small telcos, I think we're also equally suitable because you can get started with a small cluster. You can run it in production for free, up to 4 nodes. You can do quite a lot with 4 nodes of data. And once that application grows, you can easily grow MemSQL by scaling out, just adding nodes, again, because we run on commodity hardware. So in that case, it's very easy for a small telco or any kind of communication service provider to get started for free and run it in production with MemSQL.
Great, thank you, Dr. We had this question coming in while we were presenting. So you were mentioning cloud complexity. Can you elucidate on that?
Yeah, so this is a growing concern that you're starting to hear more and more and read more and more about, which is, there's this old concept of when the path of adoption of new technology starts with paving cow paths, meaning that we take sort of the old paradigm, we take the new technology and apply it in a direct one-to-one substitution way to initially. And so when roads were being built, when we could have interstates and that sort of thing, it doesn't make sense to sort of pave the cow paths. You can have more direct routes and change how transportation and transportation networks perform, where they're built, where to build the road. I'd say the analogy holds here in the cloud, in that the way a growing set of people are seeing it in the industry is that in the cloud, we're building systems in the cloud that the system architectures look very much like the on-premise architectures. Yet this is a totally new environment with different capabilities. One of those things is that you get from the cloud is the ability to just push a button and spin up any kind of component. The convenience of that is great. The drawback is that we're increasing the amount of things that have to be managed by multiple orders of magnitude. And so that in itself creates complexity in our system architectures. We're using more components where they could be simplified or unified, consolidated into fewer. So cloud complexity first is the architectural problem that we start to see in the cloud there, where you should be using as few parts as possible, as few components as possible to achieve the outcome. Secondly, it has an effect, which is the cost, because you're being billed by the byte and the storage, and sometimes the service, the additional cloud service itself. And then there's a related set of skill sets IT needs to manage and design for and operate those systems. So at MemSQL, we very much believe in a simplified approach, and only simplicity scales, and only simplicity allows you to accelerate digital transformation. And for the next 5 to 10 years going forward, we just can't chase. We won't be able to catch up with what we need to do in digital transformation if we have so many moving parts to use. So we've got to reduce and simplify.
Okay. Thank you, Dominic. I think we've covered most of our questions. If you have any further questions, you may write to osama@bhavancybertech.com. Before we conclude, any closing comments, Osama, Dominic? I'll go with Osama first.
Yeah, I think the whole idea of having this webinar is to start this type of conversation with our customers that we have in this region, especially when it comes to telecom. So let's use this as a base, and you got our contact details. If you have any question, if you want to have any more deep dive sessions about the technology, about the different use cases that you may have, and how MemSQL can help you implement and improve those use cases and the capabilities of your solutions, please reach out to us and let's start working on that.
Okay, thank you, Osama.
Sure.
Dominic, any further comments?
Sure. Thanks for everybody's attention. And I want to echo what Osama said. We're very open to having these sorts of discussions around how MemSQL with Bowen Cybertech can help to innovate with you in your telco, media, or communications service provider context. And you can find out more, as I said, at memsql.com, and you can reach us you can reach me directly on LinkedIn.
That's great. So thank you, Osama and Dominic. We've come to the end of the webinar. Thank you all for joining us, and thank you for your patience. We really appreciate you being here. We'll be sharing the recording of the session with you. We'll also, share a short survey, which you, by filling it, you can help us improve the webinar. We have an upcoming webinar by MemSQL, from dashboards to fastboards. It's basically about how to make your dashboard a fastboard. This is happening on October 28th at the same time. We'll be sharing the details with you. So we'll thank you all for joining. Thank you, Osama and Dominic, again.
Thank you.
See you until next time. Yeah.